Hello, viewers. I'm glad you're here today. The match test. You light a match and lower it into the brewing container. If it goes out, it means fermentation is actively producing carbon dioxide, which extinguishes the flame. But if it stays lit, it means fermentation is not so active. This is an early indication that you can filter and bottle your rice wine, but you might want to wait longer. And now some warnings. So the match test, it gives you pretty much the earliest possible time you can bottle. If you listen to your brew, even though the match stays lit, if you listen to your brew, you probably still hear some bubbles. So there is still some fermentation going on, but it has subsided. So you should use the match test as the very earliest indication. You don't have to listen to the match test. You might want to let it go longer. So that's an important thing to note. Don't take it as mandatory that if the match goes out, you have to bottle immediately. And I'll explain some more about that later on. One thing you have to pay attention to early on, even though the brew is probably bubbling a lot, the match might stay lit. So don't be confused about that. During the first few days, if you do the match test, the match might stay lit. My explanation for that would be that that's the first phase of the brewing process, is likely going to be mostly yeast reproducing and not as much the production of alcohol. So there might be less carbon dioxide produced. Another thing to watch out for is that if the jar is too large for the brew, if there's too much headroom, the match might stay lit. The carbon dioxide won't fill up this entire large volume. Now, the ideal brew size is roughly 2/3 to 3/4 of the jar, but often when I'm doing a multi-stage brew, I'll have a very small first stage, and that's going to not be large enough to use the match test effectively. And since this is the first stage, there's no reason to do the match test anyhow. And also, for certain recipes, you want a long brewing time at relatively cool temperatures. So if that's what your recipe wants, then the match might stay lit during this time, even though fermentation is continuing slowly. Another point is that the larger the volume of your brew, the more likely it is for the match to detect carbon dioxide become extinguished. This is because as the volume of the brew increases, the surface area of the top increases proportionally less compared with the volume. For example, a brew of 1 unit volume fits in a 1 by 1 by 1 cube. The top surface area is 1, but a brew of 8 units volume fits in a 2 by 2 by 2 cube with top surface area 4. So the larger brew is going to produce 8 times as much carbon dioxide, but the top surface area is only 4 times as large. So there's going to be twice as much carbon dioxide coming out of the larger brew per unit of surface area on the top of the brew. So if you're using a larger jar, it's going to be easier to use the match test. It's going to be more definitive. All right, so that's a brief introduction to the match test. It's a good indication. It's simple to do, but it's not the only indication. You should still listen to your brew, and you should taste a drop or two as well. So don't use the match test as the only indication of determining if your brew is done, but it's an easy thing to do. So might as well try it sometimes, see what you get, see what happens. So let me know in the comments if the match test is something you do with every brew, or something you do occasionally, or something that you would never do. Thank you for watching.